Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a long, slow journey back to a chilling chapter in colonial American history. A time when fear and rigid belief systems twisted legal processes into something truly bizarre. We're heading to the late 17th century, specifically to the era of the infamous witch trials. Our focus isn't on the sensational headlines, but on the truly fascinating and often unsettling odd legal loopholes of colonial American witch trials. Imagine yourself not tucked safely in your bed, but perhaps sitting on a hard wooden bench in a dimly lit colonial courtroom. The air thick with tension, listening to accusations that defy logic. You probably won't survive the mental image without appreciating the immense distance between then and now, and how utterly bewildering justice could be. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, drop a comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself transported to a small wooden meeting house in a colonial New England village, perhaps in the frigid winter of 1692. The air is cold, damp, and heavy with unspoken anxieties. Outside, snow muffles the sounds of the distant forest, but inside, a different kind of chill permeates the room. There's a palpable sense of unease, a tension that crackles like static electricity. People eye each other nervously, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of candles, their shadows dancing on the rough-hewn walls. This isn't just a community gathering. It's a place where whispers in Salem and other towns could quickly escalate into accusations that had devastating consequences. M-A-N-S-T-R-E-A-M. Historical fact. While the most well-known were not isolated incidents, witchcraft, accusations, and trials had occurred periodically throughout colonial New England for decades prior. Though rarely on such a concentrated and deadly scale, these events were rooted in a deep-seated Puritan belief in the literal existence of the devil and his earthly agents, witches who were believed to make a pact with him to harm others. You would feel the pervasive influence of this belief system, knowing that every unexplained illness, every lost cow, every spoiled crop could be attributed to malevolent magical forces. Now for a quirky tidbit. The initial accusations in Salem often started with younger girls exhibiting strange fits, contortions, and outbursts, which the local minister and physicians struggled to explain by natural means. These afflicted girls became the primary accusers, their dramatic public displays providing compelling evidence. Imagine a whole community watching these performances, convinced they were witnessing the work of the devil, rather than perhaps mass hysteria or psychological distress. It certainly fueled the fire, didn't it? Historians still argue whether the initial afflictions were genuine psychological phenomena, calculated performances for attention, or even a form of early social protest by marginalized individuals. Was it true bewitchment, or something far more mundane, yet equally powerful in its impact? Regardless, the atmosphere of suspicion was a suffocating blanket that settled over the Puritan communities. You would sense the quiet paranoia, the fear that anyone, a neighbor, a stranger, even a family member, could be a witch, leading to a chilling eagerness to believe the worst. The whispers, once harmless gossip, became the very threads that wove the terrible tapestry of the colonial witch trials. From the chilling concept of spectral evidence, your mind now turns to another peculiar diagnostic method employed in the witch trials, one that frequently led to a logical dead end for the accused: the touch test paradox. This was a strange, often contradictory, diagnostic method that could condemn an innocent person through no fault of their own. A mainstream historical fact is that the touch test was frequently used in colonial American witch trials. The theory was that when an accused witch touched their alleged victim during a fit or torment, the victim's symptoms, convulsions, pain, etc., would immediately cease, as the witch's malefic influence was momentarily transferred. You would witness an afflicted person writhing on the floor, seemingly in agony, only for their symptoms to dramatically stop the moment the accused witch's hand brushed against them. This sudden cessation of suffering was then presented as undeniable proof of the accused guilt, indicating their power over the victim. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the paradox, of course, was that if the accused didn't touch the victim and the fits continued, that could also be seen as proof of their guilt. They were so powerful that their spectral influence didn't even need physical contact to cause torment. It was a classic damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. Imagine being the accused, brought forward, perhaps reluctantly, to touch an afflicted person, knowing that whatever happened, it would likely be twisted into evidence against you. It was a rigged game, wasn't it? If you were on trial and someone said, "Just touch this person to make them better," you might think, well, that's easy, only to realize you've just signed your own doom. Talk about a magic trick gone wrong. Historians still argue whether the touch test's apparent success was due to the psychological suggestibility of the accuser's genuine psychosomatic reactions or outright manipulation. Was it a dramatic performance or a desperate attempt to explain inexplicable symptoms? Regardless, this peculiar test became a powerful piece of evidence, especially when combined with spectral testimony. You would feel the immense pressure in that courtroom, the silent desperation of the accused, as they were forced to participate in a test designed to condemn them. The very act of touching, usually a gesture of comfort, was weaponized, turning a simple human interaction into a trap with no escape, all within the strangely logical framework of colonial superstition. From the perplexing touch, your attention now shifts to perhaps the most infamous and certainly the most absurd of the witch trial tests, the dunking trial's absurdity, often known as swimming a witch. This method, deeply rooted in ancient superstition, presented an impossible no-win outcome for the accused, ensuring condemnation regardless of the result. A mainstream historical fact is that the swimming a witch test, while less frequently used in colonial America than in some parts of Europe, it was generally viewed with more skepticism by Puritan authorities, did occasionally occur, and part of the popular folklore surrounding witchcraft. The theory was based on the belief that pure water would reject a witch who had renounced their baptism and allied with the devil. Therefore, the person accused of witchcraft was bound and thrown into water. If they floated, they were deemed guilty and a witch. If they sank and drowned, they were innocent, but of course, dead. You would witness the grim spectacle, a crowd gathered by a cold river or pond, as an accused individual was bound and submerged, their fate sealed by an impossible choice. It's like a really morbid game of heads or tails, except heads, you're a witch and die. Tails, you're innocent and die. Makes choosing a side much easier, doesn't it? Now, for a quirky tidbit, the methods of binding the accused varied, but often involved tying their thumbs to their opposite big toes. This awkward position was believed to make it impossible for a witch to swim, supposedly ensuring that if they floated, it was due to supernatural buoyancy. Imagine being tied in such a constricting, uncomfortable way, then thrown into icy water, knowing that your natural instinct to survive, to float, would literally condemn you. It's a test designed for failure, isn't it? Historians still argue whether the dunking trial was ever truly considered a legitimate legal procedure by the most educated colonial authorities, or if it was largely a desperate act of mob justice, or superstitious villagers bypassing formal courts. Was it a judicial tool or an act of popular vigilantism? Regardless, the sheer absurdity and inherent cruelty of the dunking trial highlight the desperate and illogical extremes to which fear and superstition could push a community. You would feel the biting cold of the water, the desperate struggle for breath, and the chilling realization that there was no way to prove your innocence and survive. The splash of the water was not a sound of cleansing, but a resounding declaration of a predetermined, unjust verdict. It certainly puts a new spin on going for a swim. From the chilling absurdity of the dunking trial, your attention shifts to the very voices that drove the witch hunt's engine, the testimony from the afflicted. In a profound perversion of justice, the dramatic claims of often young, impressionable individuals, frequently children, held undue power, overriding reason and condemning their neighbors. A mainstream historical fact is that in the Salem witch trials, the testimonies of the afflicted girls and later some adults formed the primary and often sole basis for accusation and conviction. Unseen by anyone else, were considered compelling, irrefutable evidence. These accusers were treated with immense sympathy and belief by the community and the courts. Their every complaint taken as absolute truth. You would sit in the courtroom, watching a young person seemingly convulse or shriek in pain, pointing a trembling finger at an accused individual, and witness the immediate, profound impact their testimony had on the assembled magistrates and jury. It's like an ancient version of reality TV, where the most dramatic performance wins, and the stakes are, well, your life. No commercial breaks, just pure, terrifying drama. Now for a quirky tidbit, the performances of the afflicted were often quite theatrical, complete with dramatic falls, fits of choking, declarations of being pinched or bitten by invisible entities, and screams of agony. These displays were so convincing that even hardened observers believed they were witnessing genuine bewitchment. Some historians suggest that the girls, consciously or unconsciously, learned to escalate their performances based on the reactions they received, inadvertently creating a feedback loop of escalating hysteria. Imagine a courtroom where the most dramatic actor wins, and the accused, often bewildered and stoic, simply cannot compete with such a compelling performance. It was a terrifying reality show, wasn't it? Historians still argue whether the afflictions were genuine psychosomatic responses to extreme societal stress and religious fervor, or if they involved elements of conscious deceit, perhaps for attention or to settle personal grievances. Was it mass hysteria or calculated deception? Regardless, the undue power granted to the testimony of these afflicted individuals created a chilling precedent. You would feel the quiet terror in the room, the palpable fear of being named by one of the accusers, knowing that their word, however unfounded, held more weight than any denial or logical defense you could offer. The voices of the afflicted became the relentless soundtrack of condemnation, sealing fates with every dramatic whisper Section 3. From the chilling testimony of the afflicted. Your mind now turns to another peculiar piece of evidence that could seal and accuse witches' fate, familiars, and accusation. In the eyes of colonial law and belief, even the most innocent household pet could become a damning accomplice, a silent witness to demonic ties. A mainstream historical fact is that a familiar was believed to be a demonic spirit, often taking the form of an animal, a cat, dog, bird, toad, or even a spider that served a witch, carrying out their malicious commands and often feeding from the witch's body, hence the search for witch marks or teats on the accused. If an accused person had an unusual affection for a pet, or if a stray animal frequently visited their home, it could be interpreted as a sign of a familiar. You would imagine a lonely individual finding comfort in the companionship of a small animal, only for that innocent bond to be twisted into evidence of their dark alliance. Suddenly, your loyal tabby isn't just a furball, it's a potential agent of Satan. Good luck explaining that to the judge. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the descriptions of familiars in trial records could be quite specific and strange. Accusers might claim to have seen the familiar in its animal form, or even conversing with the accused. In some cases, if a pet was present during an accusation, it might even be tested for its demonic nature, perhaps by being physically harmed to see if it reacted supernaturally. Imagine an innocent, purring cat suddenly becoming a key piece of evidence in a witchcraft trial, its every twitch and meow scrutinized for signs of the devil's influence. It truly adds a layer of surrealism to the proceedings, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the belief in familiars reflected older European folk superstitions about animal spirits, or if it was a convenient narrative device to explain the supposed supernatural powers of witches. Was it ancient folklore or a legal fabrication? Regardless, the accusation of possessing a familiar was a powerful piece of circumstantial evidence. You would feel the cold judgment as your beloved pet, perhaps a faithful dog or a comforting cat, was suddenly transformed into an instrument of your alleged evil. The quiet presence of your animal companion, once a source of solace, became a terrifying, silent accuser, proving that in the colonial witch trials, even the most innocent connections could lead to condemnation. From the chilling notion of animal familiars, your thoughts now delve into the very core of the alleged transgression that underpinned all witchcraft accusations. The Devil's Book. This wasn't a metaphorical concept. In the Puritan mind, it was a literal, tangible pact with malevolent forces, a written contract sealing an individual's damnation and empowering them to work evil. A mainstream historical fact is that the belief in a formal covenant or pact with the devil was central to the concept of witchcraft in early modern Europe and colonial America. It was believed that a witch would sign their name in a literal book belonging to the devil, thereby renouncing God and pledging allegiance to Satan in exchange for malefic power. This signature was seen as the ultimate act of apostasy and the source of all their supernatural abilities. You would hear accusers or confessors describe the devil appearing, sometimes as a dark man, offering this book to be signed. A chilling narrative that painted a vivid picture of cosmic betrayal. It's like a very exclusive and extremely ill-advised book club now for a quirky tidbit. The accounts of the devil's book in confessions could sometimes include remarkably mundane details. Some confessors claimed the devil's book was made of red paper, others that it was cold to the touch, or that it contained only a few names. This mix of the supernatural and the prosaic adds a bizarre realism to the fabricated confessions. Imagine being told to describe the devil's actual pen or the texture of the page where you supposedly signed your soul away. It sounds less like a mystical ritual and more like a bureaucratic nightmare, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the detailed descriptions of the devil's pact and book were primarily derived from European theological treatises on demonology, or if they were partly influenced by the structure of Puritan covenants and church membership agreements. Was it imported dogma or a local adaptation? Regardless, the concept of the devil's book was a powerful psychological tool in the trials. You would feel the immense pressure to confess to such an act, knowing that denying it meant denying the very framework of the accusations. The silence in the courtroom would be broken by the chilling recitation of a confession, each detail adding another layer of insidious proof, convincing a terrified populace that the devil was indeed among them, collecting signatures for his infernal ledger from the terrifying concept of the devil's book. Your thoughts might subtly shift to another underlying current that, while not always explicitly stated, often fueled the accusations and fears of the colonial American witch trials, popish plots, and witchcraft. The deep-seated anti-Catholic sentiment prevalent in Puritan New England sometimes intertwined with anxieties about witchcraft, adding another layer of suspicion. A mainstream historical fact is that Puritan New England was fiercely Protestant, having broken away from the Church of England, which they still considered too popish or Catholic. They harbored a profound distrust of Catholicism, viewing it as idolatrous, superstitious, and inherently linked to the devil's work. This strong anti-Catholic bias often meant that anything perceived as superstitious or magical could be easily conflated with both witchcraft and Catholic practices, blurring the lines of accusation. You would hear sermons railing against the whore of Babylon, the Catholic Church, and the insidious nature of Satan, creating a mental landscape where anything not strictly Puritan could be seen as dangerous. Suddenly, your grandma's rosary beads aren't just religious. They're evidence of a demonic conspiracy. Who knew Catholic guilt could be so literally incriminating? Now, for a quirky tidbit, while no direct evidence suggests Catholic priests were being accused of witchcraft in colonial New England, the broader fear of external, non-Puritan influences could inadvertently contribute to the atmosphere of paranoia. For instance, if an accused witch had ever expressed even a fleeting interest in charms or folk remedies that seemed vaguely similar to Catholic rituals, like using holy water, or specific prayers not from the King James Bible, it could be twisted as further evidence of their unholy leanings. Imagine a villager, perhaps having picked up a harmless folk cure from an English neighbor with Catholic leanings, suddenly finding themselves under suspicion because of it. It was guilt by association, wasn't it? Historians still argue whether the anti-Catholic sentiment played a significant direct role in specific witchcraft accusations, or if it merely contributed to a general atmosphere of intolerance and suspicion towards any perceived deviation from rigid Puritan orthodoxy. Was it a direct causal link, or a contributing factor to widespread paranoia? Regardless, the underlying fear of popish plot certainly added another insidious layer to the already toxic environment of the witch trials. You would feel the cold judgment emanating from the stern Puritan faces, their conviction that the devil worked through many guises, including those that threatened their rigid religious purity. The whispers, already rife with accusations of witchcraft, sometimes carried the faint, chilling undertone of a perceived popish threat from the devastating void of legal representation. Your mind now turns to a powerful, almost invisible force that played a crucial role in escalating and sustaining the colonial witch trials: community pressure's role. In these tightly knit Puritan villages, fear, conformity, and the desire to protect one's own reputation intensified the accusations, creating a chilling collective hysteria. A mainstream historical fact is that colonial New England communities were highly interdependent, with strong social bonds, but also immense pressure to conform to religious and societal norms. When accusations of witchcraft began, particularly in a small, isolated place like Salem Village, fear spread rapidly. Neighbors began to suspect neighbors, and the pressure to identify and condemn alleged witches became immense. Anyone who expressed doubt or defended an accused person too strongly risked becoming suspected themselves. You would feel the palpable tension in the air, the unspoken demand to conform, to believe, the accusations, lest you be seen as complicit, or worse, a witch yourself. It's like being at a party where everyone suddenly decides the host is a vampire. And if you don't join the stake-sharpening party, you might be next on the menu. Now for a quirky tidbit. The economic and social dynamics within these communities sometimes played a subtle, yet significant role. Accusations occasionally arose between families with long-standing grievances, or against individuals who were socially marginalized, economically vulnerable, or somehow different. While not the sole cause, pre-existing tensions could provide fertile ground for suspicion to take root and flourish under the guise of witch hunting. Imagine two families with a history of land disputes suddenly finding one of them accusing the other of witchcraft. It sounds like personal vendettas given a terrifying new outlet, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the community pressure was primarily a psychological phenomenon, driven by genuine fear of the devil, or if it was also a reflection of existing social fractures and power dynamics within the villages. Was it mass hysteria or social opportunism? Regardless, the collective fear created a self-sustaining cycle of accusation and condemnation. You would sense the suffocating weight of conformity, the desperate need to align with the afflicted and the accusers to protect your own family and standing. The quiet whispers of doubt were quickly silenced by the roar of collective terror, making community pressure an invisible, yet profoundly powerful legal loophole that condemned many innocent lives. From the crushing weight of community pressure, your mind now turns to a desperate, almost impossibly difficult path for the accused. The appeals process, rare in the high-stakes world of the colonial witch trials, challenging a conviction was a monumental undertaking, often fraught with additional peril, and rarely successful until much later. A mainstream historical fact is that while some form of appeal or petition for review might technically have existed in the colonial legal framework, it was exceedingly rare for a witchcraft conviction to be overturned during the height of the trials themselves. The deeply entrenched belief in witchcraft, coupled with the immense public pressure and the lack of proper legal representation, made challenging a verdict a perilous and often futile endeavor. You would imagine an accused person, or perhaps a brave family member, desperately drafting a petition, their hopes dim, knowing the immense power they were challenging. It's like trying to appeal a parking ticket directly to the President of the United States, except with significantly higher stakes and less chance of success. Now for a quirky tidbit. Even when doubts about the validity of spectral evidence began to emerge, particularly among some of the more influential ministers and magistrates like Cotton Mather. Though he remained conflicted, it took immense courage for them to publicly challenge the proceedings. The initial resistance often came from within the religious establishment or from a few brave individuals, rather than from a formal legal appeals court as we understand it. Imagine a respected minister quietly beginning to question the evidence, knowing he might risk his own reputation or even safety by doing so. It was a slow, painful awakening, wasn't it? Historians still argue whether the eventual cessation of the Salem trials was primarily due to a growing legal skepticism about spectral evidence, a general exhaustion of the community, or the intervention of more rational voices from outside the immediate affected area. Was it a legal evolution or simply a moral exhaustion? Regardless, the path to appeal was a brutal and almost non-existent one for the accused. You would feel the immense burden of trying to overturn a verdict based on invisible specters and coerced confessions, knowing that time was running out. The quiet whispers of reason, once drowned out by fear, slowly began to gain traction, but for many, it was far too late. The possibility of redress, you realize, was a rare and distant light in a very dark legal landscape. As our deep dive into the odd legal loopholes of colonial American witch trials gently concludes, you're left with a profound sense of how fragile justice can be when overshadowed by fear and unyielding belief. It's striking to consider how these historical flaws still subtly resonate in the legacy of loopholes, reminding us of the enduring importance of due process and critical thought. Manstrea. His historical fact is that the eventual collapse of the Salem witch trials and the subsequent official apologies and reparations decades later led to significant reforms in American legal practices. The severe criticisms leveled against spectral evidence and coerced confessions helped solidify principles like the presumption of innocence, the right to confront accusers, and the need for tangible, verifiable evidence in court. Your modern legal system, with its emphasis on innocent until proven guilty and robust defense, is, in a very real way, a direct descendant of the painful lessons learned from those trials. Imagine the quiet, slow process of a community coming to terms with its past mistakes, painstakingly rebuilding a justice system from the ground up. It's like a very, very long and painful apology tour, but absolutely necessary now for a quirky tidbit. Even today, in various legal systems, debates sometimes arise about the admissibility of certain types of subjective evidence, such as psychological profiling or highly circumstantial testimony. While thankfully not involving specters, these discussions echo the historical challenge of discerning truth when evidence is nebulous. The Salem trials serve as a stark, albeit extreme, cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked belief in the courtroom. It reminds you that the fight for truly impartial justice is an ongoing one, a constant vigilance against the seductive power of conviction without proof. Historians still argue whether the memory of the witch trials has had a greater impact on American legal culture as a symbol of injustice than the actual legal reforms they directly triggered. Was it a turning point or a persistent moral lesson? Regardless, the chilling story of the colonial witch trials stands as a profound reminder of the consequences when legal processes are warped by superstition and fear. You can now let the images of dimly lit courtrooms, whispering accusers, and the desperate pleas of the innocent softly recede. The echoes of old fears, the cold logic of strange tests, and the quiet struggle for truth fade into the comforting quiet of your own space. Feel the warmth of your covers, the gentle support beneath you. Release any lingering thoughts of spectral evidence or legal traps. The day's history lesson is complete, and the night is here to hold you gently. Let your breathing slow, deep, and even, like the gentle lapping of waves on a distant shore. Imagine the softest moonlight filtering through your window, casting a silver glow, reassuring and calm. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy, a comforting weight, signaling the final surrender to rest. Drift away on that feeling, knowing that sleep is a gift and it is now yours to embrace. Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time, further back than any written records, any grand pyramids, or even the faint scratch of an ancient pen. We're going all the way to the Stone Age, to a time when humans lived intimately with the land, their survival dictated by the rhythms of nature. And our focus, as you drift off to sleep, will be on something wonderfully fundamental, something that connects us across tens of thousands of years. Dinner. Imagine, if you will, the flickering warmth of a prehistoric campfire, the crackling of wood, the earthy scent of smoke, and a subtle aroma of something roasting over the flames. You're sitting on a rough animal hide, the chill of the evening seeping into the air, surrounded by your small family group. Before you lies the evening meal, hard-won from the wild, sustenance for another day in a world both beautiful and brutal. What exactly is on that plate? Or rather, what's on that leaf or in that hollowed-out log? For a Stone Age family, every meal was a testament to ingenuity, collaboration, and sheer primal effort. And let me tell you, if you were a Stone Age human, you probably wouldn't survive a single day if you didn't know how to find, prepare, and share that dinner. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, let me know where you are in the world and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The term Stone Age covers an immense span of human history. Roughly from 3.4 million years ago to around 4000 to 2000 BCE, depending on the region. That's a long time. To simplify things, when we talk about a Stone Age family dinner, we're generally thinking of the Paleolithic period, specifically the Upper Paleolithic, which is when Homo sapiens became the dominant human species and truly began to flourish across the globe. This was before agriculture, before permanent settlements, before pottery, and certainly before anyone had invented a microwave. Life in the Paleolithic was fundamentally different from our own. You weren't popping to the grocery store or ordering takeout. Every single calorie consumed had to be actively acquired from the environment through hunting, fishing, or gathering. This wasn't just a pastime. It was the primary occupation of daily life, an incessant, demanding quest for sustenance. Your very existence depended on your skill, knowledge, and cooperation with your small band of fellow humans. The dietary options of a Stone Age family were incredibly diverse, dictated entirely by their local environment and the seasons. Were supreme opportunists, capable of exploiting a vast array of resources. Their diet was far from the simplistic meat and berry stereotype often portrayed in popular culture. In fact, it was probably far more varied than what many of us eat today. A mainstream historical fact is that early humans were omnivores, consuming a mix of animal protein from hunting and fishing and plant matter from gathering wild fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and tubers. This flexibility was a key evolutionary advantage, allowing them to adapt to different environments and survive periods of scarcity. They weren't picky eaters. They couldn't afford to be. Imagine the typical day. The men might venture out on a hunt, perhaps tracking a herd of deer or stalking smaller game like rabbits or birds. They'd rely on their intimate knowledge of animal behavior, their skill with rudimentary tools like spears or otlots, spear throwers, and their collective strength. Meanwhile, the women and children would typically be engaged in gathering, meticulously searching the landscape for edible plants. They knew which berries were safe, which roots were nourishing, and where to find seasonal nuts. This division of labor, though not rigid, was common and incredibly efficient. It's like a very old-school, very high-stakes family business where everyone has their specialized role and the profit is simply staying alive. The food, once acquired, wasn't always consumed immediately or easily. There were no refrigerators, no canning jars. Whatever was caught or gathered often had to be eaten relatively quickly, or preserved using ingenious, albeit simple, methods. The challenge wasn't just finding food, but making it last. A quirky tidbit: some archaeological evidence suggests that Stone Age people in certain regions, particularly coastal areas, developed a surprising taste for shellfish. Middens, or ancient refuse heaps, have revealed vast quantities of discarded shells, indicating that clams, mussels, and oysters were a significant and reliable food source. Imagine a Stone Age clam bake, perhaps enjoyed on a sunny beach. The salty air and the taste of the ocean, a welcome change from forest foraging. It sounds rather relaxing, actually. Probably still had to share with the seagulls, though the concept of a meal itself might have been different. While they certainly gathered to eat, especially after a successful hunt, food was likely consumed opportunistically throughout the day as it was acquired. There wasn't a strict breakfast, lunch, dinner schedule. You ate when there was food, and when it was safe. Historians still argue whether early humans had a preference for meat over plants, or vice versa, given the difficulty of accurately reconstructing the exact proportions of their diet. Evidence suggests a highly adaptable diet, with local resources being the primary determinant. What's clear is that every calorie was valued, every hunt was critical, and every gathered berry was a small victory against the constant specter of hunger. As you begin to drift, imagine the quiet efficiency of a Stone Age family working together under the vast, ancient sky, finding their sustenance in the wild embrace of nature. Settling down by the fire for another hard-won dinner, building upon the foundational understanding of the Stone Age diet as a remarkably diverse mix of hunted and gathered resources. Let's now delve deeper into the sheer variety that graced the prehistoric plate. Far from a monotonous menu, the hunter-gatherer diet was an incredibly adaptable and extensive feast, dictated by geography, climate, and season. Imagine a world that was your entire grocery store, with no aisles, just vast, wild landscapes, demanding immense knowledge to navigate. For our Stone Age family, the menu was literally the entire ecosystem around them. Animal protein came from a staggering array of sources. Larger game might include woolly mammoths in colder climates, though hunting them was exceptionally dangerous and often opportunistic. Targeting the sick or young, bison, deer, wild horses, reindeer, elk, and wild boars. These provided not just meat, but also fat, organs, which were often highly prized for their nutrient density, bone marrow, and hides for clothing and shelter. Hunting these animals required immense skill, courage, and cooperation within the group. It was less about a single hero and more about synchronized teamwork. Like a very intense, spear-based ballet. Smaller game was a more reliable and frequent source of protein. Think rabbits, hares, rodents like squirrels, and even insects. Yes, insects. While perhaps not appealing to many modern palates, insects were a readily available, nutrient-rich food source in many environments. Imagine carefully gathering beetle larvae or roasted grasshoppers as a crunchy snack. It was a protein-packed delicacy, albeit one that might make you squirm a little. Definitely not on the menu at your average Michelin-starred restaurant, but highly effective for survival. Waterways provided another crucial food group: fish, shellfish, and aquatic birds. Archaeological sites along ancient coastlines and rivers often reveal large middens, ancient refuse heaps composed almost entirely of discarded shells and fish bones, indicating that these were staple foods in many regions. Fish could be caught using rudimentary nets woven from plant fibers, bone hooks, or even simple spears. A mainstream historical fact is that coastal and riverine Stone Age communities often had diets heavily reliant on aquatic resources, demonstrating early humans' adaptability to diverse ecosystems. On the plant side of the menu, the variety was even more astounding. Wild fruits like berries, raspberries, wild grapes, wild apples, and plums provided sweetness and vitamins. Nuts such as acorns, hazelnuts, and chestnuts were excellent sources of fat and calories, though often required labor-intensive processing to remove toxins or tough shells. Seeds from wild grains and grasses could be ground into a rudimentary flour for flatbreads or porridges. Once the technology for milling developed, then there were the tubers and roots, often hidden underground, requiring digging sticks or other tools to unearth. Wild carrots, parsnips, wild yams, and various edible roots provided crucial carbohydrates and fiber. These underground edibles were particularly important during leaner seasons when above-ground plants were scarce. Discovering a patch of nutritious tubers was like hitting a small, earthy jackpot. A quirky tidbit that highlights their deep botanical knowledge. Early humans were incredibly adept at identifying not just edible plants, but also those that were poisonous or required specific processing to be rendered edible. They had an intimate, handed-down understanding of their botanical environment, which was literally a matter of life and death. Imagine having to know every single plant in your local park, which are delicious, and which will make you violently ill just to survive. It's like having a very serious life or death pop quiz every time you step outside. Fungi, like mushrooms, would also have been part of the diet. though discerning edible from poisonous varieties would have required considerable inherited knowledge and careful experimentation. And don't forget honey, a highly prized and energy-rich treat, laboriously collected from wild beehives. Historians still argue about the exact ratio of meat to plant matter in the average Stone Age diet. It likely varied wildly depending on the region, the season, and the specific skills of the group. Some groups in resource-rich environments might have focused more on gathering, while others in colder or more challenging areas might have been more reliant on large game hunting. What's clear is that flexibility and a vast knowledge of their natural environment were key to their survival. So, as you drift deeper into the quiet, imagine the sheer abundance and intricate variety of nature's pantry laid out before our Stone Age family. The earthy smell of roots, the sweetness of wild berries, the rich scent of roasting meat, a constantly changing, always challenging, but ultimately sustaining menu provided directly by the wild world around them. Let the echoes of this ancient, diverse diet lull you into a deep, nourishing slumber with a clear picture of the incredibly diverse menu of the Stone Age. Let's now focus on one of the most vital and challenging aspects of their sustenance: hunting techniques, particularly the pursuit of big game. Imagine the quiet intensity of a prehistoric hunting party, stalking through dense forest or across vast plains, their lives depending on their skill, stealth, and collective courage. This wasn't a sport, it was a grueling, high-stakes endeavor that combined intimate knowledge of animal behavior with ingenious, albeit rudimentary, technology. Hunting large animals like bison, wild horses, reindeer, or even the formidable woolly mammoths and rhinos, though these were less frequent targets, often opportunistic kills of young, old, or injured animals provided substantial amounts of protein and fat, crucial for survival in harsh environments. But these animals were powerful, fast, and dangerous. Success wasn't guaranteed, and failure could mean hunger, injury, or even death. It's like trying to catch a moving bus, but the bus has tusks and wants to step on you. The primary tools for hunting large game in the Paleolithic were spears. Early spears were simply sharpened wooden poles, hardened by fire. Later, they became more sophisticated, with points made from flint, obsidian, or bone, attached to wooden shafts. The invention of the atlatl, or spear thrower, was a game changer. A mainstream historical fact is that the atlatl, a simple lever device, significantly increased the velocity and distance a spear could be thrown, making hunting much more effective and safer by allowing hunters to keep more distance from dangerous prey. Imagine essentially getting an ancient upgrade to your throwing arm, turning a decent toss into a deadly projectile. Hunting was almost always a group activity. Cooperation was key. Small bands of hunters would work together, coordinating their movements, using their knowledge of the landscape to their advantage. They might employ various strategies: ambush hunting, hiding near waterholes, migratory routes, or narrow defiles where animals were funneled, allowing hunters to surprise and attack them from close range. Driving animals, using fire, noise, or strategic movements to herd animals towards natural traps like cliffs or burial swampy areas, where they would be easier to dispatch. This was a higher risk, higher reward strategy that required immense coordination and understanding of the terrain. Persistence hunting. This involved tracking and pursuing an animal, sometimes for days, until it was exhausted. Humans, with their unique ability for long distance endurance running, could outlast many prey animals, even in hot climates. It was essentially running your dinner into the ground. Literally, evidence for these techniques comes from archaeological sites, where accumulations of animal bones with cut marks from flint tools and spear points are found in specific locations, indicating kill sites or processing areas. Cave paintings, such as those in Lascaux or Altamira, depict hunting scenes, offering invaluable, sometimes symbolic, insights into their prey and methods. A quirky tidbit: some archaeological findings suggest early humans might have used animal disguises or camouflage to get closer to their prey. Imagine hunters draped in animal skins, slowly approaching a herd of wild horses, blending into the landscape, mimicking their movements. This shows a remarkable level of cunning and observational skill, truly getting into the mind and body of their target. It's like a very, very slow motion life or death game of dress up. Hopefully, they smelled like the animals too. Otherwise, it would have been a very short game. Hunting was not just about acquiring meat. It was also a central social activity, fostering cohesion and cooperation within the group. The success of a hunt meant survival for everyone, reinforcing bonds and distributing roles. The anticipation, the danger, and the shared triumph of a successful kill would have been powerful, unifying experiences. Historians still argue about the relative importance of big game hunting versus small game hunting in foraging in the overall Paleolithic diet. While big game provided large, concentrated sources of calories and fat, they were also dangerous and infrequent. Smaller game and gathered plants likely provided a more consistent day-to-day food supply. The balance undoubtedly varied by region and specific environment. So, as you drift deeper into the quiet, imagine the prehistoric landscape, vast and untamed. Picture the silent determination of the hunters, their spears poised their movements precise, working together as a single, focused unit. The thrill of the chase, the danger of the encounter, and the satisfaction of a successful hunt, these were the primal rhythms of survival, gently guiding you into a deep, primal slumber. The scent of wood smoke, the quiet rustle of leaves, the distant call of a wild animal, all part of the ancient world's lullaby. After the arduous task of hunting and gathering, and the transformative process of cooking, a crucial challenge remained for the Stone Age family: food preservation. Imagine securing a large kill or finding an abundant patch of berries, knowing that without any modern refrigeration, this bounty could spoil quickly. The ingenuity of early humans in devising ways to store food for leaner times was paramount to their survival, allowing them to bridge periods of scarcity and ensuring sustenance when hunting or foraging was unproductive. It was ancient meal prep, but with much higher stakes and no handy plastic containers, the most fundamental and widespread method of food preservation in the Stone Age was drying. Imagine strips of meat, perhaps from a freshly caught deer, or a large fish, meticulously cut and hung over smoky fires or laid out in the sun and wind. The heat and air would slowly draw out the moisture, creating a tough, chewy, and highly portable food source that could last for weeks, even months. This dried meat, often called jerky today, was a vital, high-protein, high-energy snack for nomadic groups or for surviving harsh winters. Fruits, berries, and even some roots could also be dried, offering a source of carbohydrates and vitamins. When fresh produce was unavailable, it's like a very organic, very long-lasting protein bar. Just don't forget to chew very thoroughly. Smoking was another effective method, particularly for meat and fish, building on their mastery of fire. Early humans would create smoky environments in shelters or pits, allowing the smoke to permeate and preserve the food. The smoke's compounds, along with the drying effect, inhibited bacterial growth and added a distinctive flavor. Imagine the rich, earthy scent of smoked salmon or cured game meat, hanging in a prehistoric smokehouse, a promise of future meals. MAINSTREAM. Historical fact is that the development of effective food preservation techniques, like drying and smoking, was a critical factor in allowing early human groups to become more sedentary, or at least to survive in environments with pronounced seasonal variations in food availability. It reduced the constant, immediate pressure to find food and allowed for periods of rest and other activities. It was a leap in food security, transforming survival from day-to-day scrambling to strategic planning. Cold storage was employed naturally, where available. In colder climates, meat could be simply frozen solid, especially during winter months, In some regions, early humans might have discovered natural cold storage in caves or underground pits that maintained consistently low temperatures. Imagine a natural freezer where large portions of a mammoth or bison could be kept fresh for extended periods. For nuts and seeds, storage in dry, cool places was essential. Underground pits lined with leaves or grasses could protect these valuable calorie sources from moisture and pests. Imagine carefully burying your stash of acorns, knowing they were safely waiting for the lean winter months. This required foresight and a good memory for where your hidden pantries were. Losing your buried treasure map would have been a real disaster, a quirky tidbit that showcases their ingenuity. Some archaeological evidence suggests that Stone Age people in certain regions might have used natural fats to preserve meat by rendering animal fat and then encasing strips of dried meat in it. This created a highly calorie-dense, long-lasting food source, somewhat akin to pemmican, a traditional food developed by indigenous peoples of North America. It's like creating an ancient, nutrient-packed energy bar, specifically designed for harsh environments. While the concept of salting, as we know it, would come much later with the development of sophisticated salt extraction. Early humans might have utilized naturally occurring salt deposits or brackish waters to some extent for very rudimentary preservation, or simply relied on the drying process more heavily. The challenges of food preservation were immense. Pests, mold, unexpected changes in weather, and competing scavengers were constant threats to store provisions. This meant constant vigilance and the development of rudimentary storage solutions, like elevated platforms to protect food from ground-dwelling animals, or securely sealed pits. Historians still argue about the extent to which these preservation methods allowed for long-term food security versus merely extending the shelf life of food for a few weeks or months. It's likely that while they provided crucial buffers against immediate hunger, sustained famine was still a very real and recurring threat, especially during prolonged environmental shifts. So, as you drift deeper into the quiet, imagine the resourceful Stone Age family diligently preparing their hard-won food, carefully drying strips of meat or smoking fish over a slow fire. The scent of smoke, the dry rustle of preserved leaves, the quiet confidence of knowing supplies were secured. These were the subtle comforts of ancient ingenuity, gently guiding you into a deep, enduring slumber, free from the immediate worries of the next meal, to acquire, prepare, and preserve their diverse meals. The Stone Age family relied on a sophisticated, albeit primal, array of tools. Imagine their hands, not holding a smartphone or a fork, but grasping precisely crafted stones, bones, and wood, each implement serving a specific, vital purpose in their culinary endeavors. These weren't just simple rocks. They were the kitchen gadgets of the prehistoric world, constantly evolving to make the challenging task of finding and preparing food more efficient. The most fundamental and enduring tool, giving the era its very name, was the stone tool. Early Stone Age tools, like the Oldowan choppers, were incredibly basic. A pebble struck with another stone to create a sharp edge. These would have been used for tasks like breaking open bones to access marrow, or rough butchering of carcasses. Over millions of years, these tools became increasingly refined. The Aculane handaxe, a teardrop-shaped biface, was a versatile all-purpose tool for chopping, scraping, and digging. Later, in the Middle and Upper Paleolithic, tool technology became much more specialized. Flint blades, precisely struck from a core, provided incredibly sharp edges for cutting meat, slicing plant fibers, and even butchering large game. Scrapers, often made from flint flakes, were used to clean hides and process plant materials. Burins, chisel-like tools, were used for engraving bone or antler, perhaps for making needles or points. A mainstream historical fact is that the progressive sophistication of stone tool technology across the Paleolithic period reflects a continuous process of innovation that directly impacted human dietary capabilities and efficiency in food acquisition and processing. Beyond stone, bone, and antler were also vital materials. Points for spears were often made from sharpened bone or antler, providing strong, durable tips for hunting. Needles made from bone were crucial for sewing hides into clothing or creating rudimentary nets for fishing. All's pointed bone tools could be used for piercing and working with leather. Imagine the meticulous process of shaping a deer antler into a lethal spear point. Knowing your next meal depended on its effectiveness, wood was equally indispensable. Though less often preserved in the archaeological record, digging sticks, sharpened branches used to unearth roots, and tubers were essential foraging tools. Spear shafts, obviously made from wood, were integral to hunting. Bowls, containers, and even rudimentary fishing traps could be fashioned from wood. The knowledge of which types of wood were strong, flexible, or heteroresistant was a critical skill passed down through generations. The development of specific tools directly impacted the diet. The invention of the otlotl spear thrower, which we mentioned earlier, revolutionized hunting, allowing for more powerful and safer kills. The development of grinding stones, mortars, and pestles, or flat grinding slabs, allowed for the processing of wild grains and seeds into flour, significantly expanding the range of digestible plant foods. This meant that previously tough or inedible plant parts could now be turned into nutrient-rich staples. It's like suddenly getting a food processor for your ancient kitchen, Just don't expect it to make smoothies. A quirky tidbit that showcases their early ingenuity. Some archaeological sites have revealed what appear to be prehistoric fishing weirs or traps, constructed from woven branches or stones in shallow riverbeds. These passive fishing devices would funnel fish into a collection area, providing a more reliable and less energy-intensive source of protein than active spearfishing. Imagine building a simple, elegant trap and letting the river bring dinner to you. Even the simple act of eating required tools. While hands were primary, sharpened flakes of stone could be used as knives for cutting portions of meat. Bones might serve as crude spoons or scraping tools. As technology advanced, the creation of specific cooking vessels, like heat-resistant baskets lined with clay, allowed for more sophisticated boiling and stewing. Historians still argue about the precise timeline and cultural diffusion of many of these tool innovations. Did different groups invent similar tools independently, or did ideas spread rapidly across vast geographical distances through networks of exchange? What's clear is that the ingenuity of early humans in adapting and creating tools was a continuous process, driven by the constant need for more efficient ways to acquire and process food. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the quiet industry of a Stone Age craftsman, carefully chipping away at a piece of flint or patiently grinding seeds on a stone slab. The sharp click of stone on stone, the rhythmic crunch of grinding, the feel of a perfectly balanced spear. These were the sounds and sensations of their daily survival. Their ancient kitchen bustling with purpose, gently guiding you into a deep, restful slumber beyond the individual acquisition and preparation of food. The act of food sharing was absolutely fundamental to the survival and cohesion of any Stone Age family or band. Imagine the quiet understanding, the unspoken agreements as a freshly hunted animal was brought back to the camp. This wasn't just about individual sustenance. It was a deeply ingrained social contract, a powerful expression of community, and a vital strategy for collective survival. In a world without safety nets, sharing was the ultimate insurance policy for hunter-gatherer societies. Food resources were inherently unpredictable. A successful hunt might yield a massive amount of meat, far more than a single hunter or even a small family could consume before it spoiled. Conversely, a foraging expedition might be meager, or a hunting attempt could fail entirely. In such an environment, the strategy of risk pooling through sharing was paramount. If you had a successful hunt today, you shared your bounty with others. When their hunt was successful tomorrow, they would share with you. This reciprocal altruism ensured that even during individual failures, no one starved. It was the original communal fridge, always stocked, but without any actual refrigeration. A mainstream historical fact is that food sharing in hunter-gatherer societies was not merely an act of generosity, but a highly structured and socially enforced practice, driven by economic necessity. Anthropological studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups, who offer invaluable insights into prehistoric behaviors, consistently show complex rules governing who gets what portion of a kill, often based on kinship, contribution to the hunt, or social status. This wasn't a free-fall. It was a carefully managed distribution system. You couldn't just walk in and demand the drumstick, especially if you spent the day napping by the river. The act of sharing also had profound social implications. It reinforced social bonds, strengthened kinship ties, and fostered a sense of collective identity. The evening meal, especially after a successful hunt, would have been a central communal event. Imagine the flickering firelight on faces, the low hum of conversation, the shared satisfaction of a well-learned meal, all deepening the connections within the group. It was the ultimate family dinner where everyone truly contributed to the feast. Food sharing was also a way to teach and transmit knowledge across generations. Younger members would observe how food was distributed, learning the unwritten rules of their society. They would participate in the communal preparation, gaining skills from their elders. This continuous cycle of learning and contribution ensured the group's knowledge base, vital for survival, was constantly renewed. A quirky tidbit that demonstrates the meticulousness of ancient food sharing. Some archaeological evidence suggests that specific tools were developed not just for butchering, but for the precise division of meat. Cut marks on bones indicate careful portioning, reflecting the social rules for distribution. Imagine a Stone Age butcher meticulously carving up a deer, knowing exactly which piece goes to whom, down to the marrow bones. It points to a sophisticated understanding of fairness and social obligation. Someone probably got the equivalent of a participation trophy bone, just for showing up beyond the immediate sharing of a kill or a gather. There was also a long-term element of reciprocity. Favors given were remembered, and favors received created an obligation to reciprocate in the future. This informal credit system, built on trust and mutual dependence, was crucial for sustaining the group over time through both good periods and lean ones. Historians still argue about the precise motivations behind extensive food sharing in early human societies. Was it primarily driven by pure altruism, by kin selection sharing with genetic relatives to ensure gene survival, or by reciprocal altruism, the expectation of future repayment? It's likely a complex mix of all these factors, making human cooperation a truly fascinating evolutionary puzzle. The practice of food sharing meant that hunger, when it occurred, was often a collective experience rather than an individual one. While periods of famine certainly existed, the commitment to sharing meant that no single individual or small family unit would be left to starve if others had resources. It provided a powerful, albeit often unspoken, safety net in a world where survival was a constant, demanding struggle. So, as you drift deeper into the quiet, imagine the warmth of a communal fire, the quiet murmur of a prehistoric family sharing their evening meal, the profound sense of interdependence binding them together, the crackle of shared bones, the rustle of past berries, the deep satisfaction of knowing you belong. These were the primal sounds and feelings of a community surviving through sharing, gently guiding you into a deep, comforting slumber. Just as the local environment shaped the types of food available, so too did vast geographical differences lead to incredibly diverse global diets during the Stone Age. Imagine trying to describe dinner to someone from another continent in the prehistoric era. Their concept of a meal would be utterly foreign to yours, defined by the unique ecosystems they inhabited. There was no universal Stone Age diet in the way we might think of it. Instead, it was a mosaic of highly specialized, regionally adapted culinary practices. Consider a Stone Age family living in the Arctic tundra of what is now Siberia or Alaska. Their diet would have been overwhelmingly reliant on animal protein and fat, as plant life is scarce for much of the year. They would have hunted large marine mammals like whales, seals, and walruses using specialized harpoons. Reindeer and caribou would have been crucial terrestrial prey. Their food preservation methods would focus on freezing and drying. Imagine a meal of blubber, dried caribou meat, and perhaps some lichen or berries gathered during the brief summer. It was a high-calorie, fat-rich diet necessary for survival in extreme cold. Definitely not a meal you'd find at a summer barbecue in, say, Florida. Now, shift your focus to a family in the tropical rainforests of Southeast Asia or the Amazon. Their diet would have been incredibly rich in plant diversity. They would have foraged for a vast array of fruit, some of which we still eat today, many long-extinct nuts, roots, and leafy greens. Hunting would focus on smaller game like monkeys, birds, and insects, and fishing would be a significant activity in rivers. Their cooking methods might include pit ovens or steaming with leaves. Imagine a meal of roasted plantains, exotic fruits, and perhaps some grilled fish wrapped in banana leaves. It was a nutrient-dense, high-fiber diet, often with a rapid cycle of consumption due to the quick spoilage in humid climate. A mainstream historical fact. The archaeological record. Through analysis of faunal animal and floral plant remains, as well as human skeletal remains, isotopic analysis provides clues about diet. Clearly demonstrates significant regional variations in Stone Age diets across the globe. These variations highlight the immense adaptability of Homo sapiens to virtually every terrestrial environment. This biological flexibility was a key factor in our species' ability to colonize the entire planet. Consider the coastal communities in regions like modern-day South Africa or Australia. Their diet would have been heavily focused on marine resources, an abundance of shellfish, as evidenced by massive shell middens, fish, crabs, and perhaps even smaller marine mammals. Seaweed and coastal plants would supplement their diet. Their tools would reflect this specialization, with bone harpoons and shell opening tools being prominent. Imagine a beachside feast of freshly roasted oysters, steamed mussels, and perhaps some sweet wild roots gathered from the dunes. A quirky tidbit that reveals extreme regional adaptation. Some Stone Age groups in desert environments developed highly specialized knowledge of desert flora and fauna, often exploiting ephemeral water sources and seasonal blooms. They might extract water from specific roots or cacti and hunt agile desert animals. Imagine surviving in a landscape that seems utterly barren to us through an intimate ancestral knowledge of every hidden resource. It's a testament to human ingenuity in the harshest conditions. And here you thought your morning commute was tough. Even within continents, diets could vary significantly. A group living in the European steppes would rely heavily on the vast herds of migratory animals, like reindeer and horses, with a diet rich in meat and fat. A short distance away, a group in a more forested region might have a more balanced diet of forest game, nuts, and berries. Historians still argue about the extent to which these specialized regional diets led to distinct physiological adaptations in different human populations beyond just cultural practices. The generations of high-fat, high-protein diets in the Arctic, for instance, lead to specific metabolic advantages. While certainly intriguing, the debate is complex and ongoing. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the vast tapestry of prehistoric landscapes, each offering its own unique bounty. The dense jungles teeming with fruits, the shimmering coastlines rich with seafood, a global dinner table constantly shifting, always challenging and utterly diverse. Let the echoes of these varied ancient meals lull you into a deep, multicultural slumber, far from the modern dilemma of what's for dinner. While the Stone Age is largely defined by the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, the seeds of a monumental shift were slowly, almost imperceptibly, being sown towards its later periods, the earliest hints of agriculture. Imagine a Stone Age family having always relied on the wild bounty of nature, beginning to experiment, to observe, and to subtly influence the growth of plants, moving tentatively towards a future where they would cultivate their own food. This wasn't a sudden revolution, but a slow, quiet transition, stretching over millennia, that would fundamentally reshape human dinner plates forever. This slow transition, known as the Neolithic Revolution, didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process of observation, experimentation, and accumulated knowledge. Early humans, being keen observers of their environment, would have noticed that certain plants grew predictably in certain places after their seeds fell. They might have deliberately returned to these spots year after year, perhaps even scattering some seeds themselves or clearing away competing vegetation. This wasn't farming as we know it, but a gentle nudge, a subtle encouragement of nature's tendencies. It was essentially nature saying, "Hey, I've got this great thing growing here." And early humans thinking, what if I helped it out a bit? The first evidence of these early agricultural hints often comes from the Fertile Crescent in the Near East around 10,000 to 8,000 BCE. Here, wild cereals like wheat and barley grew in abundance. Hunter-gatherers in this region might have begun to harvest these grains more intensively, developing specialized tools like sickles with flint blades to efficiently cut the stalks. The presence of grinding stones, as we discussed earlier when we talked about ancient kitchen gadgets, also suggests the processing of these wild grains for food. Mainstream historical fact is that this shift was initially characterized by broad spectrum foraging, where people exploited an even wider range of resources, including wild cereals and small animals, before fully committing to settled agriculture. This period saw increased sedentism, living in one place for longer periods, which made it more practical to invest labor in cultivating plants and managing local animal populations. It was like going from being a nomadic foodie to a slightly more stationary gourmet, slowly learning to garden. Early hints of agriculture also involved the slow process of domestication, both of plants and animals. Over generations, humans would select seeds from the most desirable plants, those with larger grains, or those that didn't scatter their seeds as easily. This unconscious, then conscious selection gradually led to changes in the plants themselves, making them more reliant on human cultivation. Similarly, certain wild animals like goats, sheep, and pigs might have been tamed or managed for their meat, milk, or wool, eventually leading to full domestication. A quirky tidbit that blurs the line between foraging and early agriculture. Some archaeological sites show evidence of pre-agricultural cultivation where certain wild plants were intentionally protected, pruned, or encouraged to grow in specific areas, even if they weren't fully domesticated or planted in neat rows. It's like having a favorite wild berry patch that you secretly tend, making sure it stays productive for your family. This subtle intervention demonstrates a growing understanding of plant cycles and human agency in manipulating them. You could call it the original secret garden society. The transition to agriculture was driven by various factors, often debated by historians. Was it a response to population pressure, forcing people to find more efficient ways to produce food? Was it a response to climate change, which altered the availability of wild resources? Or was it a gradual accumulation of knowledge and a growing preference for a more settled lifestyle? Historians still argue whether population pressure or environmental changes were the primary drivers for the adoption of agriculture. It's a complex puzzle with no single, easy answer. The early experiments with cultivation would have been arduous. Clearing land, planting seeds, protecting crops from pests and animals. These were new, demanding tasks that required significant investment of time and labor. But the promise of a more predictable food supply, of being able to feed a larger population, was a powerful incentive. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the quiet shift in focus, the subtle human touch beginning to shape the wild landscape. The sound of early sickles harvesting wild grain, the slow steps towards domesticating a wild animal, the first tentative planting of a seed. These were the quiet, revolutionary beginnings that would change what was for dinner forever, gently guiding you into a deep, transformative slumber. Having explored the nuances of the Stone Age diet, from big game hunting to subtle agricultural hints, it's worth taking a moment to quietly address a modern phenomenon, the so-called paleo diet. Reality and how it often debunks modern myths about our ancient ancestors' eating habits. Imagine someone today telling you to eat exactly like a caveman, and then realizing that what they describe is often a highly simplified, sometimes inaccurate version of a prehistoric meal. The modern paleo diet typically emphasizes lean meats, fish, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, while strictly excluding grains, legumes, dairy, refined sugar, and processed foods. The underlying premise is that humans are genetically adapted to eat only what our Stone Age ancestors ate, and that modern diseases stem from a dietary mismatch with our evolutionary past. While the intent might be noble, promoting healthier. Eating, the reality of the Stone Age diet, was far more complex and varied than many popular interpretations suggest. It's like building a vintage car, but only putting in modern cup holders and forgetting the engine. A mainstream historical fact is that the actual Paleolithic diet was characterized by extreme dietary flexibility and regional variation, depending entirely on local ecosystems and seasonal availability. There was no single paleo diet that applied universally across millions of years and diverse global environments. A family in the Arctic ate vastly different foods than a family in the African savanna or a coastal community in Europe. This adaptability, not a rigid adherence to a narrow food list, was the true hallmark of Stone Age human survival. For example, while modern paleo diets often exclude grains, archaeological evidence increasingly shows that many Stone Age groups, particularly in the later Paleolithic, consumed and processed wild grains and seeds. Remember our quirky tidbit about grinding stones from our talk on ancient kitchen gadgets. These tools allowed for the consumption of diverse wild cereals, providing crucial carbohydrates. Wild beans and peas would have been available to ancient foragers, some of which require processing to be edible, but were certainly part of their varied plant intake. The emphasis on lean meat in modern paleo diets also doesn't fully align with ancient reality. Early humans would have consumed all parts of an animal, including nutrient-dense organ meat and bone marrow, which are rich in fat and essential nutrients. Fat was highly prized in the Stone Age for its caloric density, particularly in colder climates. The leanest cuts of meat, while providing protein, wouldn't have been the sole focus. It's like only eating chicken breast when the whole chicken is available, a luxury of choice that ancient humans couldn't afford. A quirky tidbit that further complicates the modern paleo narrative. Archaeological analysis of human teeth from various Stone Age sites often shows evidence of wear patterns consistent with consuming tough, fibrous plant matter and grit from grinding stones. This suggests a diet that wasn't always perfectly cleaned and cooked, and was often much rougher and more varied than the idealized clean paleo diet of today. Imagine chewing on a root that still has a bit of soil attached, not quite the pristine organic produce section at your local supermarket. Furthermore, the concept of processed food is also tricky in a Stone Age context. While they didn't have factories, they certainly processed their food. Drying, smoking, cooking, fermenting, though evidence for early fermentation is harder to find, and grinding were all forms of processing that made food more digestible, safer, or storable. They weren't just eating raw ingredients off the tree or from the carcass. Historians still argue about the true long-term health implications of the specific dietary shifts that occurred with the advent of agriculture. While the move to domesticated grains and dairy introduced new challenges, it also allowed for population growth and sedentary lifestyles that fundamentally shaped human civilization. The debate isn't whether modern processed foods are healthy. They generally aren't. But whether the simplistic return to paleo accurately reflects the complex and adaptable diets of our ancestors. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, let go of any rigid dietary notions. Imagine the true dietary flexibility of our Stone Age ancestors, adapting to every available resource, consuming a far broader and often tougher menu than many modern diets suggest. The real lesson from their plates isn't a strict food list, but a testament to human adaptability, ingenuity, and the sheer variety that nature has always offered. Let the echoes of their diverse, pragmatic meals lull you into a deep, flexible slumber. Beyond mere sustenance, the Stone Age family also perceived a profound connection between their food and their well-being, intuitively understanding how certain plants or animal parts could serve as ancient remedies. Imagine a time before pharmacies and elaborate medical texts, where the forest, the river, and the fields were your pharmacopoeia and ancestral knowledge guided the use of food, not just for nutrition, but for healing. It was a holistic approach to health, where dinner could literally be medicine. This understanding was deeply rooted in their intimate knowledge of the natural world. Through generations of observation and experimentation, early humans would have learned which plants had purgative effects, which could soothe a cough, or which might reduce inflammation, while not medicine in our modern scientific sense. These were practical applications of natural resources to alleviate suffering. It's like discovering that a particular berry not only tastes good, but also helps settle an upset stomach. A dual-purpose gift from nature. No need for a prescription, just a good memory and a bit of foraging skill. For example, various wild herbs and leafy greens consumed as food would have provided essential vitamins and minerals that prevented deficiency, diseases. A diet rich in wild plants would naturally have been high in fiber, aiding digestion. Certain plants might have been used specifically for their anti-inflammatory or antiseptic properties, perhaps chewed or applied topically to wounds. A mainstream historical fact is that early human societies, through trial and error, developed an extensive practical knowledge understanding the medicinal properties of local plants. While our direct evidence from the Paleolithic is limited due to preservation issues, archaeological findings of specific plant remains at ancient sites, coupled with ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherers, strongly suggest sophisticated plant use for both food and medicine. This knowledge was passed down orally, generation after generation, a vital part of survival wisdom. Animal products also played a role. Animal fats and bone marrow, highly prized for their caloric content, also provided essential nutrients like vitamins A and D, crucial for overall health and immunity. Some cultures today still consume specific organ meats for targeted health benefits, a practice likely rooted in ancient traditions. Even the simple act of consuming lean protein after a period of scarcity would be restorative. A quirky tidbit that hints at their unique remedies. There's some archaeological speculation that certain fungi might have been used not just for food, but for their medicinal properties. Some types of mushrooms have antimicrobial or anti-inflammatory compounds. Imagine a Stone Age healer carefully selecting a specific fungus from a tree, knowing its secret powers to soothe an ache or calm an infection. It adds a layer of quiet, mycological mystery to their ancient medical kit. Definitely more interesting than your average over-the-counter cold medicine. The line between food and medicine would have been incredibly blurred. A nutritious meal itself was a preventative measure against illness. A particular herb added to a stew might be both for flavor and for its perceived therapeutic effect. The concept of separating food from drug is largely a modern invention. For them, it was all part of nature's bounty, to be used wisely for sustenance and well-being. Historians still argue about the true effectiveness of many of these ancient remedies. While some certainly had genuine pharmacological properties, others might have relied more on psychological belief or cultural tradition. It's a fascinating challenge to sift through the archaeological and anthropological evidence to understand what genuinely worked and what served a more ritualistic or placebo function. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the Stone Age family not just eating to live, but living to eat wisely, drawing sustenance and healing from every corner of their natural world. The earthy scent of medicinal herbs, the warmth of a restorative broth, the quiet confidence in nature's pharmacy. These were the subtle, ancient connections between diet and health, gently guiding you into a deep, nourishing slumber, free from modern ailments. As our deep dive into the daily routines and royal meals of the Benin Kingdom gently concludes, you're left with a profound appreciation for a rich and complex civilization. It's striking to consider how the echoes of their ancient ways still subtly resonate in modern West Africa, reminding us that history is a living, breathing continuity. A mainstream historical fact is that many cultural practices, artistic traditions, and social structures rooted in the ancient Benin Kingdom continue to thrive in various forms among the Edo people and other communities in present-day Nigeria. From the veneration of the Abba, who still holds a significant traditional role, to the artistry of bronze casting and the importance of yam in the diet. The past is not merely forgotten, but woven into the fabric of contemporary life. You might witness a modern ceremony among the Edo people, observing gestures or hear rhythms that directly connect to the ancient palace rituals we've explored tonight. Now for a quirky tidbit. Even the culinary practices we discussed, like the preparation of pounded yam with rich, flavorful soups, remain beloved staples in modern Nigerian cuisine. While the ingredients might be more widely available and cooking methods more modernized, the essence of the dishes, the communal joy of sharing a meal, and the comforting flavors persist. Imagine a modern Nigerian family gathering for dinner, enjoying a meal that, in its fundamental ingredients and spirit, directly links them to the commoners and even the Abba of ancient Benin. It's a delicious form of historical continuity, isn't it? You could say their ancestors were truly the original food influencers, without all the awkward selfie sticks. Historians still argue whether the resilience of these traditional practices is a testament to the strength of cultural identity, or if they have adapted significantly over time in response to external influences and modern challenges. Is it pure preservation or dynamic evolution? Regardless, the rhythms of life in ancient Benin, from the sacred routines of the Abba to the bustling sounds of the marketplace and the quiet hum of the night, continue to resonate. You can now let the vibrant images of Benin City, the faint scent of wood smoke and palm oil, and the distant, rhythmic beat of ancient drums softly recede. The sounds of history fade into the comforting quiet of your own space. Feel the warmth of your covers, the gentle support beneath you. Please, any lingering thoughts of royal meals or daily rituals. The day's history lesson is complete, and the night is here to hold you gently. Let your breathing slow, deep, and even, like the gentle lapping of waves on a distant shore. Imagine the softest moonlight filtering through your window, casting a silver glow, reassuring and calm. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy, a comforting weight, signaling the final surrender to rest. Drift away on that feeling, knowing that sleep is a gift, and it is now yours to embrace.